Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Crow, and I am the founder of Apogy. We provide change leadership training, coaching, and consulting. And this year we've launched a change leader speaker series. And I am interviewing people who are change professionals, they are practitioners within organizations. I'm interviewing people who are in different roles within an organization, not necessarily change management, but have experience either rolling out change or leading a transformation, and then other industry experts and academics. So lots of exciting content to come this year. And today I am interviewing my sister-in-law and change management expert, Jayme Neal. So Jayme, thank you so much for being here. Can you share with everybody a little bit about you, where you work, and what you currently do for your employer?
Sure. Thank you, Jess. First of all, thanks so much for having me. My name is Jayme Neal, and I currently work at an organization called Cochlear Americas. January just marked my 12-year anniversary, so
Woo!
I've been there quite some time in several roles within and across the organization. I currently work as a regional change manager, really focused on a massive Salesforce initiative. And have had the blessing of being within this current role for almost a year now, really directly focused on change management. I've had experience within Cochlear, mainly within our talent development and learning space, which also has included a lot of change management along that way and that pathway. So just really excited to be here and talk a little bit more about what change management is.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you in particular is having sort of seen your journey at your organization that you're at today. I wanted to share with people who are watching this video, because there's a lot of questions around how do I get started and get into change management? What is the career pathing? What is the process? Is it something I have to do formally? Can it happen organically? So you mentioned your background in learning and development. Can you share a little bit more about kind of your journey and your interest from where you started at Cochlear to kind of how it led you, either intentionally or maybe it just the cards fell and you kind of picked them up as you went? How did that whole process happen for you?
I think it's really interesting and speaking to a lot of different change professionals who are in a change specific role, it's very similar. I'd have to say I kind of fell into it.
Mm-hmm.
So being in the learning and development space, there's always this huge component of change.
Right.
Whether you're working within the project, whether you're working within, a business team or department helping, with soft skills or technical skills, there's always that component that's really critical. And so what I was actually finding in learning and development is I was taking on the role of the change manager.
Mm-hmm.
While it wasn't, formal, it was definitely a huge component of creating that successful learning experience and handing that off and transitioning that and back into the business. I think specifically across organizations, maybe it can be challenging to get into the change space and understand how do I really create this career path? There's lots of good information out there. It's something that I think you have to really learn and grow and try to capture what is it that makes change successful.
Right.
And when we think about that, it's really around the neuroscience and the psychology of the people. And so as I kind of leapt into that and kind of understood some of that piece, it was like, okay, where do I go from now? How do I get more information around this? And so how my career unfolded within this space is really seeking out certifications and learning everything I possibly could around it. There's certainly the certification through your organization, Jess. I think that's a good place to start understanding the framework and then building that into what the organization needs and how the organization's culture can embrace that change successfully.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that would be true for any type of professional development, any type of certification. There's a lot of great options out there. It's really what you do with the information after you've acquired it, and then how you can adapt it to be appropriate and sustainable for the organization and all the nuances that exist within a company. What advice would you give to somebody? I mean, you've mentioned like getting certified and learning a lot, but what other advice would you give to somebody who is interested in getting into the change management space?
I'd really recommend, as I think that's kind of a main focal point, is understanding what successful change looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and then incorporating that into a process.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we think about Cochlear, we're very early on stages as far as the change management practice. And so, what we find is there might be some inconsistencies with knowledge. There might be inconsistencies with education, and what do I need to do if I know about this big change or even a small change? And what process do I need to take? What steps do I need to take? Because there is a process to it.
Yep.
There are things that you need to think about. There are strategies that you need to put in place that need to be executed in a specific order. And again, understanding what the culture of the organization is and how that plays a part in what you need to do and when you need to do it and who you need to talk to. That's another big aspect of, the people side of change, is getting the line managers involved, communicating very early on, some of those key functions that really help that success and help drive that information and creating that successful change plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think about change management as it's obviously not rocket science, and it's easy to miss or forget or do those simple steps that have such a powerful impact on the overall experience and outcome. And you've mentioned a couple of things that I want to highlight and reinforce for anybody who's watching this. You've talked about the psychology of change and behavior change. You've talked about, yes, there's also a process and tool, or not tool rather, but a process that you can follow and the steps you can take, and then thinking about the culture. And so I think this is great for someone who's interested in getting into this space, that these are things that you can start to think about, whether or not you have any formal training in change management. And obviously, I fully support that, being a provider of that. But I love that you've already hit on these things. What are some misconceptions about change management in your mind, or at least that maybe started when you were focused on change management that you've been able to overcome through the work that you're doing?
I love this question, Jess. I think that is one that I reflect on frequently, especially over the last 10 years of my career. It makes me think about kind of at the beginning of my career when I was a people manager, and, I would bang my head against the wall, because business is ever changing. And we had small changes, medium changes, all sorts of level of changes. And it's like, why can't these people get on board? How do I help support them? What do I do? I was such a novice in the change space. And, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is we all experience change in our life, whether that be personal, whether that be professional, and that's just something we all have lived with our entire lives. And so the biggest epiphany I had is really the psychological process that you go through individually, personally, through any change, whether that be personal, professional. And so really thinking about each individual change journey, that's a huge component in how you approach and how you drive successful change. And you have to incorporate that journey, because everybody's different, and you can't assume that, I've got this team, they're all in the same role or similar roles. They, this is, maybe it's a very simple change. Everyone's going to go through that very differently.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions is, we need to pause a little bit and think about those things so that we can help support in the way that we need to, and shift and change and flex our approach in order to meet those needs.
I love that. And it's what it sounds like you're saying too is creating space for some of that empathy and compassion for the human experience that will be so different for everyone. I love that. We, here at Apogy, we talk a lot about the importance of employee well-being and how that can influence how ready an individual is for change. So getting into some of that psychology of change and the neuroscience there as well. And well-being has been a big topic for CEOs these days. We're in, year 3 of the pandemic. And I think people are feeling, we're feeling it, right? Whether it's Zoom fatigue or something more significant, or maybe some people are, doing great as well, which is fantastic, as they should be. How is your organization thinking about employee well-being and that change journey in the same context, right? Like, obviously it is a personal experience, but does well-being come up in your circles of conversation at the leadership level as there being a correlation? And again, I know the conversation is, even though we're into it, still pretty early on at the industry level.
Absolutely. I think that has been a critical piece that has been on the top of mind, not just at our executive level, but even trickling down through different levels of leadership. And even at the employee level, if you think back to when we all of a sudden, snap your fingers, pandemic hits us and we have to all go virtual, that was a really tough change for a lot of people. And then people got through that. And now we're, I think at a point where, okay, time to come back. And so that's another shift and change. And so just being mindful of the shifts people are having to make, the multitasking and the different responsibilities is different in this world today. The merging and the not so, black and white line of work and home life and that shifting and kind of merging and flowing with each other. Well-being is at the top of the list. And even if you think about Zoom fatigue or Teams fatigue and, being in the virtual space is very different. I think about, personality types and, for all of our extroverts out there, how challenging that must be to not have that energy fulfilling piece of, I get to be in person with people. And, so it's definitely top of mind. I think, as you mentioned, it's very early on. So, I think it's more of a discovery area right now of what can we do? What are some great strategies that we can use? We've got a lot of education and a lot of resource materials out there that are available. But I think it's something that we need to continue looking at and continue implementing different strategies to help with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the leadership level as well. What can leaders do to really think about how do I make sure I'm helping to support my people?
Absolutely. And I mean, it feels like a tip of the iceberg in many ways. Like, we're sort of seeing the top part, and then underneath the surface, there's just so much more that we still have yet to unlock and understand. So I personally am just glad the conversation has started, because for years, and having been in change management for a long time as well, it wasn't something where you would talk about it in the same context. And even the topic of burnout was not as common or as acceptable, pre-pandemic. I think the silver lining of having the disruption in that way is that people are more aware of all the ways in which our lives beyond the walls of our places of work can impact and affect us as humans, and it spills over into every part of our lives. So I think there's more acceptance and embracing of that conversation than there ever has been, and I think it's going to lead to some really positive shifts, culture shifts, how we think, act, and behave. So I'm excited about that transition, even though I would agree it's still, most organizations are trying to figure out what is the right mix and how do we develop adaptive, resilient cultures and organizations in the process. What do you think? Just one more question. I'm kind of looking at my questions to make sure I ask you a good one. What is the next big thing in change management, or what is really exciting you right now? You can kind of pick which direction you go with that.
So I think one of the most exciting things, and again, I'm very drawn to the neuroscience of change. One of the things that Cochlear has done recently in the last few years is implemented the agile methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we think about the neuroscience of change and how we shift and apply change management to the agile way of working,
Mm-hmm.
might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And so just, it's something that I've begun exploring a little bit, but definitely is the next big thing that I'm going to be focusing on, just to, try to dig in and understand, how do we shift the change management process? What does that look like in an agile way, to where it's very quick, it's effective, it's efficient, and it meets the needs of the business that are embracing this new way of working.
Yeah, I mean, you've highlighted a kind of an important component where people experience change in different ways and go through that process. And Agile is a process that is all about quick iteration and getting change out there, to the end users. And so there is a little bit of a tension there, I think. So as you research this, and I will continue to, I'll look into this as well. I think, let me know what you find, because I'd love to bring you back on and share with the people who are watching this video. It's definitely a place that, having worked in organizations that went to Agile, still had a little bit of waterfall. There's some interesting dynamics there for sure. Yes. Jayme, I love this. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you made time for me today and shared your wisdom and your experience with people who are watching this video, learning about change management, how to get into this, things to think about, and what makes you excited. Thank you so much. I will post this on our YouTube channel. And yeah, thank you very much for joining today. I'm really glad we had a chance to talk about your experience and what makes you love change management so much.
Thank you so much, Jess.
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you.